It's really a pleasure to be here. And again, thanks to the organizers for putting all this together. Just really quick, so I get a feel for the room, because we're here at API Days, but this is kind of like a mini track within API Days. How many of y'all in the room are already using Drupal? Got it. Okay. I wasn't sure, given but this will. I promise it won't be too remedial. We're going to talk industry. We're going to talk a little high level. We're going to talk about. I think there's two not competing, but almost very inverted ways of looking at Drupal's role in the future of the web as it comes to AI. And so I'm happy to kind of speak about it from this sort of outside-in perspective versus the inside-out perspective. But I'll start by just introducing myself quickly. I don't need a lot of introduction. I've been doing the open web for 25 years, a very early user of Drupal, helped teach a bunch of people how to use Drupal in the early days. Founded this company, Pantheon, 15 years ago, run a lot of Drupal sites. We make the operational workflow of building, launching, maintaining, and managing fleets of 1 to thousands of Drupal sites very productive and painless. So happy to help folks with that. And because we now run a platform that collectively serves over 1 billion unique monthly visitors, we actually get a little bit of a window into what's going on with the web in general. So something that I like to do is look into the data of all engagement with the platform overall to see how crawlers and bots and agents are changing the way that the web is consumed. Have some research coming out on that soon. But let's just start with the obvious. The way the web works is changing. And I was just talking to Ben outside about and I actually won't get into this in too much detail, but it's a great prompt for a future talk. The underlying economy of the open web is being turned upside down by the rise of AI and answer engines. Now, I would argue that underlying economy was already deeply unhealthy because of the consolidation of advertising platforms and the rise of walled garden social media, et cetera, the dream of a vibrant and verdant and diverse ad-supported open internet was already not on its deathbed, but hobbling around with a cane in the late teens. But it's now something else is going to happen, right? And we don't really know what that is. That's a huge challenge. But I think we can speak with a lot more certainty about the way the web is changing in terms of how it's built, right? This is becoming very real now. I'm going to spend a bunch of time talking about that. Who uses the web for what and when? That's a tremendous change. It's true that if you're looking for a simple answer to a simple question, you don't need to go to a website anymore because your friend in the computer already knows the answer or can find it for you. But Google search was already doing some of that a while ago. That's not a tremendous change. What I think is actually interestingly happening now is AI has made it such that everybody who wants to use it has essentially an intern, right? A research assistant. Someone who can go off and compare notes and collect knowledge and bring you a little summary of what's available out there. And I think the framing of an intern is useful to me mentally, not to degrade the work that interns do, because it's wonderful, and an internship is a great way to gain experience, and I don't think internships will or should go away. But the level of work that can be handled by these tools, it's intern stuff. Now, you can have 1 million interns working around the clock, and it's actually not that expensive, so interesting things become possible under those circumstances. But as it pertains to the web, what it sort of means is people will still come to websites when they want to go deeper and get beyond a surface level précis, but they will come informed. They will come with strong opinions. They will come not to hit your landing page because of a keyword optimization and maybe click a call to action. They're already going to have a lot of context when they show up. And that changes the role of the website itself. It both exists to feed this information ecosystem with rich, nutritious content, my man, so that the interns can bring good knowledge to the people who are seeking, research assistance. And then when the humans do show up, which they will continue to do, just maybe in slightly smaller numbers and at different stages of their journey, to meet them where they are with a richer and more engaging experience. So all that's happening, and plus the way that we build it all is changing. So lots going on, and it can be quite confusing. I should have slipped this slide sooner, so I'll just go right past it because there's a lot of words. So AI is here to stay, but the post-peak moment is coming. Like, hype cycles don't last forever. And what I'm showing you here is an overlay of two different classic tech biz guy graphs. One, the roller coastery red one, is the hype cycle that was built by Gartner. The other is the technology adoption life cycle that Mr. Moore came up with in the late 60s. And basically what happens is some exciting new technology comes out, people get really stoked about it, maybe a little bit too stoked, and then there's a resetting of expectations into reality. And when you see the adoption of technology, innovators and early adopters are the ones that typically drive that early excitement. And then when the trough of disillusionment, the kind of things come crashing back down to earth, this coincides with the phase of technology adoption that Moore calls the chasm, which is a new technology that actually doesn't get off the ground. It doesn't get past early adopters and innovators. It doesn't become widely adopted. So a great example here, we keep doing it over and over again, will be virtual reality. It's been through this 4 times. Metaverse is the most recent example. Facebook, $50 fucking billion. Zero. They wrote the whole thing off. Because guess what? People don't really want to use it. It's not real. But AI, I don't think anyone in this room thinks we're going to go back to a world where you don't have the availability of these tools, where you don't have the modality of chat as this really engaging way to work with software and find information, right? I have not, outside of some people that are crazy degrowth, we're going to burn down all the internet. It's an interesting hypothesis, worth considering. We're just not going back. But there's going to be some resetting of expectations, some resetting of economic realities, and then we get into this really interesting phase called the slope of enlightenment by Gartner, where the early majority, the late majority, and people who are late to adopt technologies actually all get on board. And this is the kind of, I'm not going to try to call that we're at the peak or we're in the chasm or anything else like that. I'm not trying to call the market, right? I'm saying this pattern repeats. All of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again. And we just need to be ready for what it means as we get into the really long-term building sustainable value part of the situation. So there's this graph that or this image that I had Gemini zhuzh up a little bit, right? Classic fork in the road, same old shit, crazy new shit. We're in the world of crazy new shit, right? And even though it's kind of scary, I don't think any of us really want to go back to the old world either. However, I'm going to put forward a way of thinking about this that maybe will have some value to you in the room, which is actually that there's kind of a classic political compass at work, right? Whether you're someone who's a maximalist, someone who thinks that we're going to see just ever-increasing exponential rates of change, or you're sort of more pragmatist, or I would even call myself a skeptic at times, and you're like, no, this is really exciting, but it's not getting rid of all jobs in 5 years. That's obviously nonsense, right? Don't say stuff like that. You don't sound credible. And then, depending on where you fall on that spectrum, are you hopeful or fearful? And I think what's really interesting to me is I put myself, and I want more of us to be up here in the top right, the winning quadrant, obviously, where we're AI realists. But this is an underrepresented position in the market right now. Most people are either still on some kind of crazy hype sauce, and they might be, again, going out and saying that no jobs will exist in 5 years, or they're blowing up buildings because they think that this is going to take over, or they're so frustrated with the BS that they've become haters, and they're just kind of rooting for the bubble to pop and for things to collapse. I'm not saying that any of these positions are invalid. I'm just saying it's very strange to be in this moment and kind of identifying with being an AI realist and realizing how lonely of a box that is. It takes real work, mental work in the space. It's a very noisy space. It's a very crowded space. There's tons of paid influencers throwing out stories all the time. And being an AI realist means being practical. Saying can you show me that working? what did you actually build with that? Does this work beyond the demo, et cetera? And trying to build towards a world of orderly, sustainable development. So I'm taking the AI realist position. I invite you all to join me. It's quite nice. We've got solar power and other cool stuff. So the question is now, in the AI realist land, what does a CMS do? What is the role of a CMS or something, maybe become a new acronym, with this type of technology if we're adopting the AI realist position? So I think we have to acknowledge there's one possible answer to this question, which is that it doesn't. That's a possible answer. And we're seeing that play out in real time on the web right now. This year, for the first time in over 15 years, since the venerable Germans at W3 Tech started scraping the internet and amassing a treasure trove of data about how it's built. It's the oldest contiguous data set about the web. The technology none is now running more websites. It's been on a steady downward trajectory since before this graph can show you. I remember doing a talk about this trend in like 2009 when WordPress was still below 10%. And we were looking at none being the leading technology for creating the web because most of it was built bespoke, right? It was like people threw together a website, they hand-coded some HTML, they had a Perl script that spat out some HTML, they wrote a J2EE enterprise servlet that delivered some HTML, and all those things were handcrafted, or they were very, very, very niche technologies to the point where the Germans at W3 Tech could not categorize or classify them. And you had these other open source frameworks like Drupal, WordPress, and Joomla at the time that had mid-single digit market share on the web, and you could watch them slowly grow. And then here we are starting in 2015, WordPress was up a little above 20%. None still crushing at 60% because it had this huge head start. But just steadily going down over time as WordPress and a whole bunch of other technologies came up. And we've seen the rise of these SaaS platforms, right? Like Wix, Squarespace, Shopify. And they provide some good value for a lot of folks because they're easy to use and easy to maintain. You don't have to think about it too much. And they've got, they're a bit of this story. But none just kind of, going down pretty steadily over time until this year. Until, literally as of January. That number moved up, and over this long time horizon, it might not seem significant, but that's like hundreds of thousands of websites that are now suddenly running none. What is none? Well, none is Vibecoding. If you look at the rise of Next.js, which is the most popular framework for Vibecoding stuff to spit out a static output, this is from a different data set. It's the HTTP archive, which lets me go deeper into the data to suss out more stuff and categorize the front-end frameworks and other things. So I don't have data going back to 2015, but just since 2023 till now, the significant uptick of Next.js. No other technology on the web has that steep of a curve over that same time horizon. And that's in part because it's beating the allegations of JavaScript having a flavor of the month. It's become the flavor of the past 3 years. But also because it has become a preferred framework, and Guillermo's wonderful platform, Vercel, has become a preferred destination for Claude and others to help people vibe out a site. And hey, let me ask a question. How many of y'all has vibed out a site? Have you built something with Vibecoding? Yeah, it's pretty fucking cool, right? I actually really like this technology, and I like it because I think it brings back and also democratizes the funky creative era of the early web, because people can just make things, and it's it really puts that power in people's hands. However, we all know as professionals that there's a ceiling to how far you can go by vibing. Because what you get with vibes is what you want with a website is you want a nice hamburger, right? It's structured, it's got buns, it's got some sauce, it's layers. And what you get with the vibes is there's a front end, right? Because you got to deploy it somewhere. Maybe there's a back end. I don't know, bro. And then inside, it's bespoke. It's spaghetti. It's not like it couldn't be read by a human, right? It's not like this is total gobbledygook, but like, it's using a framework like a Next.js or something like that. So there's like conventions in there and so forth. And if you say, hey, also use my design system, Vibecoding can do that. It's pretty fucking cool. So you're going to have some amount of familiarity and structure, but these are probabilistic systems. Given the same set of prompts, it will come up with 3 slightly different things if you run it 3 times. And I don't know how many of you have tried to build something like specific and where you really care about any of the particular details of Vibecoding, but I find that to be the most frustrating freaking thing in the world. Like I made this with AI. This is like the Gemini slop. It's got the logo in the corner. Like, the first shot of this was really close, and then I spent like 45 minutes getting the details right because it doesn't spit out something that I can edit. It spits out just like a pile of pixels. And like working with your intern to like fix the details of your project can be really frustrating because your intern actually isn't very good at the details. So this, I think, is not going to work. I think really we're talking about like a rise in static site generation in a lot of cases, and we all know this story, or whomst among us has lived this story, where we as developers thought, this is going to be so great. Put all my stuff in Markdown. I'm just ripping off like the old, like, is this web scale database meme? This is I'm old, right? But this was, at the rise of the NoSQL database, this was a famous comic, and it was like, hey, how do I query my data? How do I need to get something out of the database? And it's like, well, it's a NoSQL database. And well, yeah, how do you query it? Well, you just write a simple map reduce function to like aggregate all the data and filter down to what you're looking for. Did you just tell me to go fuck myself? I believe I did, Bob. So the problem with the static site generation is it effectively means it's a front-end developer's world only. And when you think about Vibecoding, it's like your intern's front-end developer world only. It is very limited in terms of what you can do. And when you think about the SaaS platforms that are trying to hook up to this, and again, no shade to these tools because they do provide a lot of value, especially for people who can't handle, they don't need to have all the complexity of owning everything. But the web flows of the world, right? If you actually go in there, it's like because you can edit every little thing and like change anything to mean anything, like, and you can hook AI up to those things too. You can have it like put a bunch of generative stuff in there, but it's like, maybe it's not spaghetti, but it's like a soup burger, like slightly more structure. There's like carrots and peas that are recognizable, but it because it builds from this notion of like a pixel perfect kind of page builder. It's like Adobe InDesign, but for the web. The degree of detailed and control, there's not really much governance over any of that. And so I think the appeal of these tools is going to be actually, and honestly for pure vibe-coded stuff, because if you're a small business or you have like a purely static output or you have a project that's like kind of a short lifetime, like vibing it out actually might be a viable option. Doing it with one of these tools might be a viable option. But if you're thinking bigger and you have a website with some complexity, multiple stakeholders, multiple content editors, you have more than one website, you have to have some consistency in this estate, like the state of the tooling right now does not meet the moment. And we all know this, right? So we need to go beyond the vibe. That's the theme that I'm talking about. And stolen from the keynote in Chicago, this is not a bad way to frame the opportunity for Drupal, since we're talking to a very Drupal-centric room, that you can use AI to prototype fast, then build Drupal, and then use Drupal to build systems that last. Now, how that gets done is a really interesting question. I'm going to move through this because I am running out of time. There's this inside-outside thing, and I just added a bunch of question marks because I don't know that AI outside Drupal for developers is quite the right framing. Because I think something that is happening already in the world is the AI agent that I prefer to interact with and I interact with a lot is becoming more and more the place where I go to get work done. And I actually think there's all the AI inside Drupal stuff is awesome, but I think there's a world where making Drupal more friendly to the AI outside is actually a tremendous part of the opportunity. That's why we've invested in supporting the MCP server, by supporting all of some of the provider plugins, and I think an open source technology that's willing to play a supporting role in a broader technology ecosystem actually has a ton of potential for Drupal, because while it is helpful to have a chat interface to a complex administrative CMS, ultimately people don't want to go from tool to tool to tool to tool and use a bunch of different chatbots. They want to just like use the chatbot that they already know and love, and this is just an example of like hooking up Claude to the MCP server in Drupal and having it do your content modeling for you. And the thing about this is like the underlying infrastructure of what you need to run the long-running chat sessions and retain the context and so forth is very different than the underlying infrastructure you need to manage content. So I think Drupal as a source of content, a source of context, and a target for the agents to develop has a lot of potential. I think doing deep work like this actually inside of Drupal will be challenging, not only for technology reasons, but also because at the end of the day, people just want to use their Claude, right? They're much more comfortable there than they are in sort of a context-specific agentic setting. And the other thing is that the web is a team sport. One of the big problems we have right now with AI and Vibecoding is it's all single player, right? It's just you and your friend, the computer. And this is why it drives certain people totally insane, because you're just talking to the computer, sort of talking to yourself a little bit. And one of the things we need to work on as a set of practices and technologies is figuring out how do we, there's going to be some talks later today that'll actually get into like real stories of how this is happening. How do we make AI into a teammate for our group? How do we take all of these different stakeholders and the tools that they want to spend all their time in and bring them together into something that can produce great work? I think those practices are just beginning to be understood. We partner really closely with Google Cloud, obviously, and this is their sort of take on it, which is, you know, I don't know if they'll ever catch up with Claude, but this idea of, hey, we're going to basically push all of our productivity suite stuff, all of our cloud stuff into a single agent builder / agent interface. And like, you just show up at this place and this is where you do work. And your team can see it and you can work with other people around it. And their idea is like let's build a full stack thing that can do all the stuff, which is interesting. In a world where we're thinking about what does this look like after the peak and some of these companies are going to have to shake out, I don't know what the future of Google actually is 10 years from now, because their core business is the advertising model on the open web, and that is getting turned upside down. But I think it's interesting that they have this value proposition of kind of vertically integrating all the things. Obviously, you have to be comfortable trusting Drupal, which not everyone is, or trusting Google, which not everyone is. But this is their take on it, and I'm eager to be able to demonstrate soon how Drupal can fit into this kind of equation as part of a orchestrated fleet of workflows where we don't have a bunch of agents in silos doing things across, within just the CMS or just our database or just our CRM. We actually have a control plane that spans a whole bunch of different pieces of software and can bring all that stuff together. So I think there's certain contexts where if you can do all that inside of Drupal, that's great, because it's going to be probably simpler if you can do it that way. But in many enterprise instances, it's just not how it's going to work out. So that's kind of like what I'm personally kind of interested in trying to take shape. Obviously supporting the MCP server as a key thing, and the Gemini provider plugin, but trying to show people how, if you want to have Drupal CMS with all the AI features, leveraging the best and most awesome technologies available from this underlying provider, we're going to put all those things together for you. And with that closing note about being operational, like this is where I get back to, like, we're getting into the world of AI getting operationalized. Like, we all need to become AI operators. I can't believe nobody has AI ops. I'm sure somebody does. But being able to actually operate this stuff at scale is going to be the competitive differentiation. It's not about crazy innovation anymore. It's really about what can you do to make real for people in a reasonable time frame. So thank you. Go beyond the vibe, and I appreciate your time.